everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I just wanted to film a quick video basically giving a wrap up of the books that I read for Springathon. So I read 5 books, which were all the books that I had picked for my TBR to meet all the different prompts for Springathon, and I am going to talk about these in order of least favorite to most favorite. And I just want to do this quickly, so I'm going to get right into it. So on the bottom of the pile, sadly, is How to Catch a Mole, Wisdom from a Life Lived in Nature by Marc. Despite the fact that this has a gorgeous cover with lovely gold leaf on it, this book did not deliver for me in its promise. It is a memoir, a nature memoir of Marc Hamer's time spent basically his entire adult life. His career was as a mole catcher in England. And so moles cause a lot of havoc for not only homeowners in wrecking their lawns, but golf courses and farmers' fields and things like that. And so in England, mole catchers are still hired to trap out and kill moles as pests. And so this is Hamer's sort of ruminations of this career as he is approaching retirement age. He is thinking about whether or not it is appropriate to kill animals for this purpose. He's thinking about his entire life and different aspects of choices that he made when he was a younger person. My problem was this just didn't hang together. There was some really lovely sort of discussion of the life cycle of a mole and its natural history, and some also interesting discussion of Hamer's personal life, but the two didn't tie together very well for me, and I found the narrative to be somewhat disjointed, so just didn't work for me. The next one for me, I should say that this one meant the animal prompt. And then next in order of least to most favorite was The Salt Path by Raynor Winn. I read this for the travel prompt, but it would have equally have met the water, animal, or bird prompt, as you can tell by this cover. Again, this is another memoir, this time of Raynor Winn's time spent with her husband hiking the Southwest Coast Path in England after they lose their home and her husband is diagnosed with a terminal illness. There were parts of this that I enjoyed very much, but I had a struggle to reconcile what the author talked about with her decision to simply do this walk, basically to walk away from her life responsibilities and to not deal with the problems that she was facing at that moment, but instead she and her husband just basically chuck it all and say, yeah, we'll deal with it later, and we're going to hike this path right now while we try to figure out what we're going to do with ourselves. They have 2 children, and to me, as a mom, that was a decision that I struggled with. That being said, I did really enjoy the descriptions of the Southwest Coastal Path, and especially as the discussion of how coastal areas of the country are built up to cater to the tourist trade and to sort of seasonal residents versus longtime residents, because I live in that sort of environment as well on the coast of Maine. So I did enjoy that, and I did enjoy a lot of the nature writing, and I also appreciated that Raynor Winn did not sort of dwell on her emotional state throughout the whole book. I mean, she kept coming back to it, yes, for sure, but for me, that wasn't her, like, it wasn't just constant dwelling on her emotional state, which I appreciated. Then in the third spot, I did say what that prompt was. Okay, so in the third spot was the only book that I don't have a hard copy of. I read it as an ebook, and that's The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. This is more of a straightforward science book, although there is some personal anecdotes woven in. And Ackerman just explores the intelligence of birds. It's really a tremendous book. I enjoyed it very much. Just because birds are small does not mean their brains are not mighty. Ackerman goes into many different aspects of bird behavior and biology to demonstrate how intelligent birds actually are, from how some birds can cache, hundreds of thousands of individual seeds and nuts and remember where those are with a mental map in their mind of where they've located those things. How some birds even observe where other birds put their seeds in caches and steal those over the winter. Fascinating. And, from how they build their homes and to their mating behavior, to how they migrate and return back, especially the story of pigeons and how pigeons return to their home lofts is fascinating. There's a lot of new data coming to light that shows that birds don't just use one cue in order to navigate. They're using multiple different cues, and one of which may even be smell, which is simply fascinating. And that the size of the bird's brain doesn't, we think as humans and certainly primates and other larger mammals, we can demonstrate the size of that individual animal's brain and try to correlate that to intelligence, whereas birds have tiny little brains but have a lot of intelligence packed in to that small space. Completely fascinating. All the discussion of how some birds use tools to problem solve. Really, really interesting stuff. Highly recommend that book, The Genius of Birds by Jennifer Ackerman. And I read that one obviously for the bird prompt. For the water prompt, I read Seaweed Chronicles, A World at the Water's Edge by Susan Han Shetterly. Now, I had a very personal connection to this book. This book is discussing seaweeds, specifically rockweeds and kelps and other seaweeds that grow in the Gulf of Maine, where I live. And Shetterly explores both the natural history of seaweeds and how seaweeds are used by humans, both today and in the past. She delves into aquaculture, wild harvest, how seaweeds are used for food, what seaweeds are used for in other products, how seaweed interacts in the wholeness of the environment as habitat and shelter and food source for other animals. Fascinating book. Super interesting to me because I knew quite a lot of the people that she interviews for this book. I knew some of the examples that she uses of projects and other things that are happening around seaweeds in Maine. So I had that added enjoyment of sort of knowing the players and knowing the context and knowing the landscape around the issues that she's discussing. But this is a great book if you're interested in how that balance between how humans use a natural resource and how they conserve a natural resource. I think this delves into that topic quite well, especially from the point of view of an algae, which is not really a living creature that anybody really probably pays a lot of attention to normally, but it's a seriously important topic and very fascinating, especially in Maine, where we're trying to understand the importance of seaweed within the wider ecosystem and also what the impacts of harvest or of growing this in an aquaculture context might be. So if you're interested in any of those topics, I would highly recommend Seaweed Chronicles. It's very well written and engaging. For me, this was a 5-star read. And as I said, this was for the water prompt. And then, of course, you are not surprised at all if you've been following my channel over the last month that the #1 book I read for Springathon is The Story of More, How We Got to Climate Change and Where to Go From Here by Jahren. This book I read for the plant prompt. It's sort of a primer of climate change from multiple different perspectives. Jahren is an excellent science writer. She is very much able to take complex information and lay it out for the general reader and the general audience in a humorous way, even though she's dealing with topics that are very scary and things that are quite dire in their long-term implications. She does write this with a lot of hope and a lot of suggestions for actual positive action that you might take. Although this isn't an activist book by any means, this is taking somebody's personal story and personal anecdotes and fitting them into information about how we got to where we are with climate change, what we can expect in the near future, some things we might do to sort of mitigate human impact on the climate. I love this book. You can see I've tabbed, I discussed, I will continue to try to press this book into people's hands. This is an excellent, excellent book, and I am super glad that I read it for Springathon. So 5 books for Springathon, hit all 5 of my prompts. I'm super happy with what I read, even with a book that was not quite successful, like How to Catch a Mole. I think all of these books I learned something from, and I'm glad that I read them. So no duds there in that. None of these books would I say I wish I hadn't read them. All of these books I'm super glad that I read. I learned from them. And I'm so thankful that Natalie and Emma had put together the idea for the Springathon readathon. I hope we do it again next year. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous readathon. I hope you found some books through all of the different videos that went up over Springathon. I hope you found some books that you might like to read. And if you did, please tell me about them down below. And I hope you are doing some wonderful reading over this Memorial Day holiday, and I will talk to you later.